excited.
Well, great. Well, Vince, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. I know Vince, and I think many of us do. He's definitely a really common participant here in the community. So I'll let you just go ahead and get started.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Yeah, as Caesar said, I try and be a staple in the community, and you're my people. So it's very easy and comfortable and natural for me to reach out to you guys whenever I need anything, or for a little bit of inspiration, or just to love on you guys. So let me get this kicked off. Here we go. All right. So hi, everybody. Like I said, my name is Vince, and get myself set up. Today, I wanted to zoom out a little bit. It's tempting for me to try and pick the hardest and most complicated topics that I can and completely nerd out on it until there are very, very few of you left paying attention. But I wanted to actually connect personally with you guys today. And I want the message of what I'm trying to say to dig deeper and to tap into something that hopefully is a little bit more meaningful and longer lasting than some new feature or tutorial, as fun and exciting as those are. I think that at some point we all struggle with this concept of meaning in our work. Whether you design dashboards or build predictive models or create data art or deliver presentations or anything in between, at some point, you're going to get to a stage in your journey where you start to ask yourself questions like, what am I doing this for? Or what am I trying to say here? And it makes me think of a career or skill trajectory where we learn something new and then immediately dive into the deep end, learning every trick and technique that we can get our hands on, because they feel like really quick wins, right? It's an easy barometer to show our capabilities as data practitioners. Now, I remember when I first started learning Tableau, I tried to teach myself all the fancy tricks like hover highlight actions, or in-chart iconography, or Andy Cotgreave's proto-Vision tooltips. Those are the good old days. And I thought that if I put these kind of techniques into my visualizations that my coworkers couldn't do, then my end users would sing my praises and that they would wonder how they ever managed before loading up my dashboard. I anticipated that doing so would help me feel like a great designer. But I missed something. I'd completely overlooked simplicity. Even back then, I had this nagging feeling that perhaps I was substituting flair for substance. Because when I looked at the designs that stood out in my mind, those visualizations that inspired me to get into this career in the first place, there were often simple techniques and clean designs delivered in elegant presentation. Rarely did they use complex math or hacky workarounds. So I had to accept this hard truth that those designers and analysts were tapping into something that I didn't have yet. I didn't have access to yet, right? The impact that they were able to deliver wasn't a result of technique. It wasn't even about the how. It was about their ability to tell me a story. Now, for a lot of us, I feel like it takes too long after we've learned all those techniques to start asking the question, what do I want to say with my work? What's the story? What's the journey that I want to bring my end users on? And so today, I'm going to share with you a story of two visualizations that I created, which took opposite trajectories. And perhaps you may find the encouragement that you need to better connect with your own work. Now, a couple of years into my career with data visualization, I became obsessed with maps. I never, ever got to use them in a business setting, but I loved how dramatic they could be, sometimes without even having to say anything. Now, history and literature is full of amazing stories in which maps and cartography play an integral part, from Ptolemy and Mercator to Middle Earth Skyrim, Narnia, Lego, you name it. Truth be told, my favorite fictional books were always the ones that started with a map inside the front cover. So I started looking around at all of the available data sets that I could make a map with. And I found a treasure trove, the NASA Earth Observatory. Now, there are a ton of amazing things that you can learn with this data. And as it turns out, NASA has a lot of data. Total shocker, right? But the data that first caught my eye was the average land surface temperature. Now, there were a couple of parameters to set, but I ended up with data that showed the nighttime temperature of the Earth's surface to a precision of 0.1 degrees Celsius. The data was aggregated as an average taken across 8-day periods over 10 years. So I'd found my data. Now it was time to take a look. The downloaded CSV for that first 8-day period came in at just over 52 megabytes and looked something like this. So we have the longitude as headers, columns A through EHM, and the latitude in column A, rows 2 through 1,801. And at each intersection, we have a temperature reading for the land surface, as if you were to put your hand to the ground, and a dummy value that you're seeing here of 99999. And this is for all the points that occur over water. So for those of you keeping score, that means that every single spreadsheet contained 6,485,401 data points. And I had 46 different spreadsheets coming to a total of almost 300 million points of data. Now, this was clearly going to take some effort to get into a shape that I could use, but it didn't look like it would be technically difficult, just time consuming. And so while there were several ways that I could have approached this, I wanted to take the opportunity to try Alteryx. This was a tool that I had never used before, but I felt could really do well at this sort of repetitive task. Now, my Alteryx workflow was pretty simple, really. Bring all the data in, transpose it into a skinny data structure with columns for week and latitude and longitude and temperature, and then filter out all the 99999s, and then export it as a Tableau data source. Now, it took a while. The data size had ballooned up to 24 gigabytes before filtering out all the nines, but I wound up with just 97 million rows of usable data. Now I just had to bring it into Tableau. And once it was in Tableau, I realized that the best way to create this map that I had in my head was to plot it as a scatter plot with the tiniest marks that I possibly could manage. And it made sense in my head because latitude and longitude are just X and Y coordinates wrapped around a sphere. And so after I built my scatter plot and I filtered it to one data slice, I saw that my map consisted of just over 2 million separate marks. A little formatting, and my first week's map looked like this. I was in love with how this was looking. And so I eagerly changed my date filter to the next 8-day period and found that rendering this particular map took Tableau about 60 seconds. My dream of using the pages shelf for animation was dashed on the rocks of ambition. So next I decided to use Tableau's export as image feature. I saved each and every week as its own image and then tried to build a slide deck in PowerPoint. My thinking was that maybe I could automate the slide transition as short as possible and just fade one image into the next. It didn't work though. At this point, PowerPoint had a minimum slide duration of a quarter second, and I found that it kind of made the whole thing jerky and take too long. And so next I loaded them into a program that I found online that created a short movie based on the images that you input into a specific order. And this was the final result. As the video begins, we're in January, a season where the higher temperature occurs in the southern hemisphere. And then as we progress through spring into the summer months, that band of warm temperature rises to the north and slowly recedes back down towards the South Pole towards the end of fall. And we arrive right back where we started, having just witnessed a global climate journey, a breath of the planet in the span of 25 seconds. Now, this video had been created using over 88 million data points. It was built using 4 different tools, and it needed far too much data for Tableau Public to ever host it in my wildest dreams. Now, I was proud of what I had built, and I was eager to tell people about it. So I wrote a blog, I told all of my friends, and I posted it all over the place. You can imagine then my disappointment and encroaching self-doubt when it was met with only a couple of likes and virtual radio silence. This had been the viz that was going to catapult my career. What happened? It lacked a story. It was beautiful, certainly in my opinion, but it had no passion, no call to action, no energy. Now, fast forward about a year later, my kids and I, at the time, my twins were 6 and my youngest was 3. We were having a conversation at dinner about TV. Specifically, we were discussing Paw Patrol. Now, for those of you without young children in their lives, let me summarize the show for you. Ryder, in the center, is a 10-year-old boy who can talk to dogs, and his team of puppies saves the coastal town of Adventure Bay from all sorts of accidents and emergencies. Now, my twins had been talking about how funny the show was and who their favorite pups were. And I kept talking about how irresponsible it was for this beautiful coastal community to place its entire well-being in the hands of a little boy and some puppies. Not in a police force, not in a Coast Guard, not in a hospital or any emergency services, just a little boy and half a dozen puppies. My kids didn't get it. But the longer this conversation went on, the more of an idea began to form in my head, an absurd idea. What if I did a mature, thorough, very grown-up analysis of a children's television show? Where would I even start? Now, as you might expect, there isn't a great deal of data available about this show. No one has built a public-facing API. There are no repositories on GitHub. It's never been featured on Kaggle. And to my knowledge, it has never been covered in Analytics Insight magazine. This was going to take a lot of research and building a data set out by hand, minus having to watch hundreds of additional hours of Paw Patrol. I did manage to find a fan wiki about the show, complete with a mouse cursor that looked like a tiny red paw print. I like that. And so once I had my data, I began my analysis by defining a metric by which I could compare the puppies according to their team value. And I call this the Emergency Readiness Score, or ERS for short. And it was a weighted sum of each character's value according to their role in each emergency, either as a primary responder, a secondary responder, or a tertiary responder. And by contrasting the popularity of each puppy as defined by the number of emergencies in which they had been assigned a role against their ranked ERS, I was able to determine that Sky, the only female puppy, ranked second overall in both popularity and ERS, but Zuma, the only aquatic puppy, ranked lowest in both scores. So I compared it to a final metric, average views divided by number of episodes. Sky comes in nearly last, while Zuma remains a fan favorite, despite the apparent lack of trust that Ryder shows in it. He really is an underdog. And so I concluded my analysis by suggesting that Ryder consider the benefits of shifting from an autocratic leadership style to a more democratic approach, and that by doing so, he would cultivate a more even delegation of responsibility and further synthesize the talents of his team more effectively. Furthermore, Ryder also has an obligation to both Adventure Bay and his own charges in the Paw Patrol to display an evenly balanced and empowering stratification of social responsibility and personal development opportunity within his team. Now, I recognize how ridiculous this whole thing was, but I stand by my approach and my analysis 100%. This visualization didn't rely on complex data or groundbreaking visualizations or anything like that. It was mostly bar charts and line charts. But the story was compelling. It was entertaining. It was relevant to both children and business savvy adults. And it was met with all the fanfare and support that I had hoped to receive with my land surface temperature viz. My technical skills were virtually the same for both, but one succeeded where the other had not. I'm telling you the story behind these projects so that if you find yourself getting to the point in your career where you begin to ask yourself the question, why am I doing this? What am I trying to say here? You feel empowered to take a step back, to think about what story you can tell. What might you need to change in your perspective to tell the story from a different point of view? How can you transcend the skills that you've acquired already and elevate your viz or your dashboard using story? I'm 11 years into my career with data and 7 years into my career using Tableau. And there are times where I still feel like I'm just getting started. This is a journey that takes time. And if it's worth it, it should take time. I love the concept of Sonder. It's a word beautifully described by the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows as follows. Sonder is the realization that each random passerby is living a life as vivid and complex as your own, populated with their own ambitions, friends, routines, worries, and inherited craziness. An epic story that continues invisibly around you like an anthill sprawling deep underground, with elaborate passageways to thousands of other lives that you'll never know existed, in which you might only appear once as an extra sipping coffee in the background, as a blur of traffic passing on the highway, or as a lighted window at dusk. So try new things, take risks. Don't be afraid of failure. Lean into this concept of Sonder and find the stories that others may overlook. And when you found it, when you can sight in on that emotional component in your data and tell its story, honor it. Tell it with conviction, whether it's the story of an entire planet or an absurd conclusion to a preposterous analysis of a kid's TV show. Honor it, because there is an audience that cares about it. Thank you.
Absolute gold there, Vince. Thank you. Once again, if I had to tell my boss that I went to a conference and learned about Paw Patrol and how it's a cautionary tale, I'm dying to hear what they have to say about that. But yes, Paw Patrol, love it.
Yeah, you know, it was a fun project to work on, and the people that I got good feedback from were also parents of young kids who I felt had a very unique perspective on the absurdity of my crazy idea.
I'm seeing the chat room go crazy. People love it. Lots of lots of great replies back. Excellent. So I'm gonna actually just kind of open up. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask Vince through the Q&A or even straight through the chat. I'm keeping an eye there. But yeah, man, this is really cool. It's awesome to see. There was a lot of laughter coming through, but it was just so good. It was so good.
Thank you.
Through your journey, I guess kind of what's the one thing that's probably surprised you the most? It just kind of
yeah, that's a good question. It's a big question. I think that for me, and I've spoken about this before, but my biggest hurdle in my journey in this career has been myself, has been that creeping sense of imposter syndrome where I felt a temptation to just fake it until I somehow become it. And so I think that one of the most surprising things for me has been the value of humility and transparency about that. One of the things that really stood out to me about the Tableau community in particular, compared to other tech communities, is a sense of everybody is willing to admit that they started somewhere, that they didn't start at the top of this pedestal that other people put them on. And that willingness to reach out to those who are new in their journey made all the difference in the world to me, and encouraged me to be that person for others, right? That after a while, and this plays out on the forums too, where you kind of go from being a wallflower that's just absorbing everything like a sponge to realizing that there are people who are starting out who can benefit from what you've gathered.
Always exciting to see that, where you've got that, oh, I've got the answer, I know this. And
Yeah.
you can shoot it through. And
Yeah, and it's so fun to fan that flame in people that are new to the community, that like, you might feel like you don't have all the answers, and that is okay. That is a good thing, because people can relate to that. People can feel empowered by that.
I'm going to ask you a quick question that Emily posted. She wanted to know, did you try to write a story for the Stunning Viz?
Yeah, you know, it was interesting, because I think part of it was that I was so caught up in the fact that I was able to take this idea from my head onto the screen. And I was so excited to get it to that point that I just, like a dog chasing a car, I didn't know what I would do if I caught it. I just wanted to put it out there. And so, yeah, perhaps I think there is a story to tell there. I haven't refined what that story is yet, and whether, like, what a call to action about that might be, because it kind of goes a different direction than climate change. It's more just an abstract explanation of how climate works. And I think for myself, you know, having young kids who are super interested in this kind of thing, it's fascinating to them to learn about things like climate. So I think if I were to write a story about it, that might be the direction I go.
Very cool. I kind of want to see that blossom into something. I
Sure.
love the idea of the Stunning Viz. It's funny, because I think it's where we all strive to go at first, and some of us get discouraged just because of our, you know, technical capacity, tools, or like me, I run out of memory all the time. But you made it happen. You got there. You caught the car. But
I did. I did.
but what happens once you get there? Yes, definitely a good one. Cool.
Yeah.
That is very excellent.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for giving me a chance to talk about this stuff. I'll be on for a little while if anybody has any other questions, or yeah, reach out to me. I'm all over the place. Happy to chat.
Well, excellent, Vince. Thank you so much for coming on.